If you can resonate with being a high achieving, deep thinking, deep feeling woman who's capable and hardworking and has these big dreams and goals in life and maybe business, and yet moving towards those goals has become something that just feels very heavy and performative. Like there's always more for you to do before you can just be. And you're choosing things out of should or what would make sense. And yet you also have this feeling that there's more to you than this, that there's more aliveness, there's more passion, there's more power available to you. And yet you just don't quite know how to tap into that just yet. And if you've gotten so used to diving into all the self care strategies and the self help books, and you're constantly feeling overwhelmed by all the things that you have to do or the ways that you have to work harder to just be able to let yourself be and live from your truth instead of just knowing about it like some foreign concept, then the truth is that you don't need any of that. And you don't need more books. You don't need more courses and programs. And you really don't need more people just telling you that you have to do more and you have to work harder and giving you the impression that you're not enough unless you've fixed yourself. And what you really need in those moments is validation for who you've had to be, as well as permission to be who you truly are. And in today's video, I want to dive into some steps in terms of how you can actually make that happen, in terms of how you can actually get to a place where you feel like you're able to own all of who you've been and find compassion and love and validation and empathy for that, as well as feel a sense of passion and empowerment and encouragement for who you truly are. And to be able to not only know of your truth, but actually live from it, breathe it, express it, dance from it, create from it, lead from it. And these steps are probably going to be a little bit different than what you might be used to. And they might be a little less tangible or a little bit less logical. And they might be a little bit less of what you're used to in terms of what I feel like so many kind of, you know, 4-step formulas and everything is about is very specific. And this very much of like, this is what you need to do. And yet for me, these steps are more about the underlying principles and the kind of energy changes and lifestyle changes that are required for you to be able to get to a place of really being able to meet yourself, being able to actually live from your truth instead of just knowing about it and planning for how you're going to get there. And essentially, for me, these steps are way more of a guideline, way more of something that can help you understand what you might be missing and what might have been gotten in the way for you to really feel like I can actually breathe. I can stop bracing all the time. I can stop trying to work so hard for achievements that don't even feel good when I do get them. And for me, these steps are also the steps I always wish and want to give to the women that I talk to who are striving so hard and chasing achievements and pushing through their emotions and constantly telling me about what they should do or what they're choosing to do because it makes sense. And they're not living in their truth. They're not expressing their true selves. They're not radiating from their full authentic power because they're so busy living in their mind. They're so busy thinking about it and planning for it and strategizing things. When in truth, so little of our lives are based solely in our minds. So much of our wisdom and our truth and our livelihood, or I don't even know the word for that, but kind of like our life force, I suppose, come through our bodies, come through our feminine energy of creation and passion and aliveness and joy and ease and receptivity. And it comes through our body's wisdom, our nervous systems. And so when you're constantly working on things that are based in the mind, when you're constantly just reading about things but not fully living them, experiencing them, tasting them, exploring them, they just become these things you know about, but not things you actually live from. And that's what I want to talk about today in terms of the steps that you can start incorporating and honoring as a sense of guideline for how you can begin to move through the blockages and challenges that you're experiencing, as well as how you can actually live a life that feels true to you and where you live in alignment with your truth and where you're expressing all of who you are without feeling like it's based on should and performance and constantly dimming your power and pretending to be someone else so that you can seem more acceptable or nicer, and where you feel like your goals and your needs and your desires and your passions are just right. They're exactly what the world needs. They're not too much. These steps, as a final note before we dive into them, are probably also going to be a little bit uncomfortable because they're so simple and they're also so much of what you've probably been trying not to do. And it's one of those times when, if we're constantly trying to push a boulder up the hill, and it feels so heavy and it's just like so exhausting. And we think that that's what we need to do. We think that in order to feel the way we want to feel and be who we want to be and be who we truly are, we have to keep pushing this boulder up. And I feel like these steps for me are kind of my way of letting you know that you can stop pushing the boulder. You can step to the side and you can let it fall. You can let it roll down because things actually get to be much easier than we tend to think that they can be. And the things that, you know, the personal development industry and the self help gurus and the wellness experts and all those people tend to tell us that we need to do and kind of tend to promote this idea of what a fulfilling life looks like, when that's so much based on what looks good on paper as opposed to what actually feels good to feminine, sensitive, deep feeling, deep thinking, reflective, passionate beings who have also been used to being very hardworking and overachieving. And so if you feel like all the self-care strategies and the tips and tools to feel more like you and the real you haven't quite been working out, then maybe these steps could help you too. So, the first step, and in many ways the most important one, because I feel like it just kind of opens up the space for you to be able to incorporate and live through the other steps, is to slow down. You have to slow down. You have to create more space in your day. The truth is, when you are overwhelmed and have a fully packed schedule and you're constantly busy and you're tired all the time from how busy you are and you never have the time and the spaciousness that you require to meet your needs and to fulfill your desires and to meet yourself and to heal the burnout and the exhaustion that you've been going through. It's never going to be possible because there just is not space for you. Your schedule has made space for everything and everybody else, but not you. And yet you are the one who's meant to create all of this. You're the one who's meant to sustain all of this. And what I think of this as is, and I talk about this in the course Honestly You, and I talk about the importance of making yourself your number one priority. And that is such a hard thing to do for us, especially as women, because we get told so much of how we have to pour into everything and everybody else. And we are always just, last on the to do list. And yet, what I want you to start thinking about things of is if you think about all the things that you care about, all the things that are important to you, all the things you want to create, all the things you want to do, if you think about them as like these different pieces of a mind map, then I want you to really reflect on what's in the center of that mind map. What's connected to all of those things that you want to do and create and impact? It's you. You're the center of the mind map. You're the one thing that's connected with all those different things. And so it only makes sense that the center, the start of it all, needs to be well. You can think of it as, a tree. If the roots are dead, or the leaves and, the flowers and berries and everything that could grow from bushes and trees, are they going to thrive long term if the roots are dead? If the roots are barely surviving, barely making it through? They're not. And yet somehow in this twisted society, they have told us that we're supposed to be able to sustain all these things and we're supposed to be blooming and nourishing all these beautiful flowers, and yet the roots are never to be taken care of. And the soil doesn't matter. And it doesn't work like that. And that to me is where the slow living comes in, where we have to slow down. We have to create more spaciousness. And we have to create space in our schedules to be able to let things come to the surface, to be able to feel the things that we haven't been able to feel, and for you to even get clarity in what am I really needing right now and how do I really want to move through things. You won't have that clarity because you're so busy doing everything else. And in a different previous video that I did, talking about why you still don't feel ready or confident enough to begin and just getting started, I talk about a part of my own journey where I really decided to start healing from burnout. And I basically decided that and realized that that was the thing that I needed the most. And there's kind of two things to mention about that, because one is that when I had that epiphany, that realization that this was something that I hadn't just been dealing with for a few months, it was something that I've been dealing with for decades, and that everything else that I wanted to do was not going to be possible for me to do unless I kind of healed that and dealt with the biggest thing that was blocking me at the time. And the thing is, the only way that I could have even had that realization, coincidentally, was at a time when I had just graduated from college and I hadn't yet gotten another job. And that was the first time in such a long time when I just spent time on my own with kind of nowhere to go, nowhere to be, and where at the time, like I was living with my partner, but he was, I don't remember if he was going to school or to work or something, but he was out for most of the day. So it was just me on my own, not really having, meetings or a schedule or, anything that was kind of demanding me to show up at any given time or place. And it was that space that was created from that that caused me to just not have anywhere else to go, not have anything else to turn my attention to than to meet me, to meet my own needs, to meet, like, whoa, this is what I'm going through. And secondly, it was once I had decided that this is what I need to heal and move through, having the spaciousness and that ability to actually focus on my needs and take care of my needs is the only thing that made that possible for me to heal through that. If I had, had that realization, but then jumped straight into a busy full-time job, I wouldn't have healed from burnout the way that I did and as kind of quickly and effectively as I did, not because it has to go fast and not because it did, but it would have, I would have still been struggling with that because that pressure and that busyness would have gotten in the way of me actually taking care of my needs. And I know there is so much of a busy culture out there, and we've gotten so used to being celebrated for the sense of how busy we are and how exhausted we are. And, burnout has become almost the sense of this badge of honor of like, we're doing so great because we burned out somehow. And I know that that is the culture that is promoted to us all the time. And I know that it's really hard to step out of that. And yet we also need to make that decision of, are we going to keep doing it in the old way where it hasn't been working for us? And if we look at things honestly, and this is actually also one of the things that we talk about in Honestly You, is kind of just really critically and honestly looking at the people we feel like we have to perform for and the people we feel like have this expectation to us and the people we feel like have this idea of who we should be. We also have to look critically at them and really ask ourselves, like, do I really feel like they've got it figured out? Like, do I really feel like this is a role model for me in this area? Do I really feel like if I were living as them, I would feel like I'm living my truth? Because if that's not the case, then we need to decide something different for ourselves. And we need to realize that for the first time, maybe in a long time, we are in charge. We no longer have to fit ourselves and mold ourselves into somebody else's ideas to be able to survive and be accepted in those environments. And now it's our time to create the environment and decide what it means to be accepted and what it requires to be accepted. And a final note on this point, and this is kind of the biggest point, so the other ones will be a bit shorter, so don't worry. But like I mentioned, this is kind of like the biggest one because it creates the space for everything else. I also just want to let you know I understand if right now, you've got the kind of schedule that does not allow for slower living. And like I understand that that might be your situation right now. And also, that's not going to change unless you decide that it needs to change. And it doesn't mean that you have to go do something super drastic tomorrow, but it does mean that you need to decide to make some changes. And it does mean that you need to decide, like I said, if you're going to choose to live in accordance with who you should be based on who everybody else expects you to be, or if you're going to start living in your own truth. And if you're going to essentially accept that some people will misunderstand, some people will judge, and some people will never understand you. And that is a tough nut to swallow, but it's still the truth. And so the reality is that you might not have that in place already right now today. And yet that doesn't mean that you can't implement it, that you can't move towards it. And I think this could be a little bit of another video, another talking point for us to dive into. And you can let me know in the comments if you're interested in that. But just to kind of get you started with some ideas for how to kind of shift things in terms of being more open to accepting that maybe I need some slow living right now. And maybe that means working part-time hours instead of full-time. And yes, making a bit of less money, but maybe it's looking at your budget and realizing that you can actually make that work and still be well. And you don't have to have a full-time job. Maybe it means leaning on your partner for support and financial support. Maybe it means moving in with family for a while. Maybe it means getting a roommate and living with some friends for a while. Maybe it means just changing your job and just getting out of that really high performance pressuring job and getting into something else, even if you don't feel like that's what you want to do for the rest of your life, but you just feel like at least here I can have some peace. And again, I feel like this can be a different topic, so I'm not going to dive too deep into it right now, but again, it's sometimes about looking for the opportunities and also accepting that things get to be a bit unideal. Things get to be in a way where you don't have to kind of be perfect and hold it all together and have it all perfectly in place. And you get to take a step back and you get to actually heal and you get to move through and you get to slow down. Now, once you've implemented a little bit more slow living, and not because you can't start on the other steps before, and not because it's this sense of you have to get one step perfectly in order before you can start on the next, it's just a little bit that each step kind of opens up for more possibility for the next. But it's still kind of a cycle. So it's still, you don't have to get one thing perfect. It's just kind of like you start and then you do that a little bit and you do that a little bit and then you come back to the first thing and then you just move through the cycle like that. But then the next kind of layer or step is really being able to label and move through your emotions. And this is something that is so, so important for everyone. But especially for us deep feeling, deep thinking beings who are very attuned to things and yet have also been kind of trained to push down our emotions a lot and just, grit our teeth and tense our bodies and just get through things and just push things down and suppress them. And what we really need to do is to be able to move through them. And I feel like for me, a very first step to doing that is just being able to label it first and foremost, actually being able to label what you're feeling and also being able to recognize that there are no good or bad feelings. And I have a video on that already, so I won't dive too much into that. But being able to actually understand that every emotion is healthy and it is necessary and it's not a good feeling or a bad feeling, it's just a feeling and it's just something that needs to be moved through. And the problem is that we tend to get so scared of our feelings and we tend to get so worried about, what if I feel this, like let myself feel this and I just lose myself? Like, what if it just takes over? What if I get stuck in this forever? And yet, the kind of sad reality is that the only reason we feel that fear is because we get stuck when we don't move through things. When we suppress and push things down and don't let ourselves move through the feeling, is when we get stuck in it. And then that stuckness creates this fear of, but what if I get stuck in my feelings? When the truth is, if you move through them, you're moving through them. And I don't remember who said this, but there's someone out there who talks about how emotions and feelings are like tunnels and we're supposed to move through them. And when we block them, when we suppress them, when we tell ourselves that we shouldn't feel this way, that's when we get stuck in the middle of the tunnel. But emotions themselves are built as tunnels. They're just meant to be something we move through. And the reality is that as long as we're not able to feel what we're feeling and we're just constantly suppressing and we're getting to this place where we're just living on autopilot and we're feeling numb and we're feeling stuck and our bodies are feeling tense, they're feeling heavy, they're feeling depleted. And we get triggered a lot. We feel a lot of anxiety. We feel a lot of frustration and aggression. And we just feel like everything is just too much all the time. That's when we really need to move through our feelings. And it's the sense of getting to a place of living from your truth without connecting to your feelings, without being able to move through your feelings. It's just, they don't go together. So you need to be able to label and honor and move through your feelings because otherwise you're going to keep being stuck and you're going to keep being stuck in those old emotions rather than being able to move forward and move into living from your truth. And then, very connected to that, as the next kind of step in this process, is essentially being able to connect more to your body and get more into your body and out of your mind. And for so many of us, we get so stuck in our mind and we're so good at thinking about things and planning for things, but when it comes to the body, we're not so familiar And again, we kind of live this sense of autopilot and living, feeling numb and tense. And so, not only do we need to label and recognize and move through our emotions, but we also need to connect to that body. And for me, that has revolved a lot around feminine energy. I have a video on that as well about ways to connect and activate your feminine energy. And there's also just this sense of actually moving your body. And there's also a lot of, somatic practices that you can do and nervous system healing. And all of that lives in the body. And all of that impacts us so much. And when we're not recognizing that and when we're trying to just think our way through things, it doesn't move the needle because we can't think our way out of struggles and challenges and pains. And we can't only think as a way to grow and heal. We actually need to bring what's below our minds here and we need to bring it into the body. And I'm I'm like a very real example of that, so to speak. I spent a lot of years kind of, growing and healing and learning and working a lot on beliefs and mindset and identity and all those things. And don't get me wrong, they still helped, it still made an impact, it still caused me to heal and move and change a lot. But it wasn't until I really started working with a somatic therapist and practitioner and really being able to kind of work with these things with the body that I really felt a difference. And it was like the sense of, like I said, like things were still changing and evolving, but it's like things just really spiked and really like felt differently once I was able to really bring my body into it and really find that healing and understanding in the body as well. Because there's one thing to understand something logically, and there's a completely different thing to feel something and experience something in our bodies and our nervous systems. And then the next sort of step or layer to this is one that is absolutely crucial. And I think in many ways it could really go as the first step, or at least very early on, because it's very impactful and we don't recognize enough how important that is. And depending on how the order of videos and things come out, I do have a video that I talk a bit more about this. I also have an episode, a podcast episode on In Her Truth, and there's also a blog post where I discuss this. So I won't go too much into detail about it right now, but just know that you can find other sources where I dive a bit deeper into this. But it's the importance of shifting your social environment. And essentially, when it comes to the people that you're around, that makes a huge impact in terms of not only in what you're feeling and what you're experiencing, but it's so important in terms of what you get supported in. And when it comes to all these different things about, embracing more of a slow living lifestyle, actually recognizing and moving through your emotions, actually tuning into your body, maybe tapping more into the feminine energy than the masculine energy you've been used to living from. All of those things are 10 times harder when everybody else around you kind of pushes that down, maybe belittles it, maybe just points out how they don't understand you, maybe they judge you, maybe they outcast you. There's so many different things where doing that and going through that healing process and growth can feel so much harder when you don't feel like you have a supportive support system around you. And it's not because you need to have this, fully built support system and everything needs to be perfect in that area. It can start with as much as one person. It starts with just you, surrounding yourself with different people online and in social media, and actually like being more conscious of what kind of ideas and thoughts and just lifestyles that you're kind of consuming. But all of this makes such a big difference for how you move through things. And I feel like the important thing with this that I want to mention briefly here as well is that so often, you know, there's a certain person that you're expected to be when it comes to the people that you may have around you right now in terms of family and maybe friends or coworkers and things like that. And that version of you isn't who you truly are. And then we get very stuck in this fear of, well, I can choose between having belonging with these people, or I can choose my alignment and my truth. But then in our minds, that's like, but then we're going to be all alone and we're just not going to have belonging. And as human beings, especially as female feminine beings, we're especially primed to that sense of social connection. But not only that, as human beings, we're social beings. And so the idea of giving up belonging is terrifying and it's going to tell your nervous system, heck no, don't do that. And yet the truth is that when you can start spending time around other people, and that's where it can start with your kind of online surroundings and everything, when you start spending time with other people and you start just being around people who are more validating and supportive and accepting and forgiving and loving and encouraging and empowering, then you start getting this sense of, oh, so I can be my true self and also have belonging. It doesn't have to be belonging or true self. It can be one type of belonging where I don't feel good about who I am, where I feel like it's all about performance and should, or another type of belonging where I feel true to myself and I feel encouraged and supported. And I feel like people really know me and actually like who I am. And so that's why that shift in environment is so, so important because then you can showcase to yourself that it doesn't have to be either or, and that you can have your true self and belonging all at the same time. And it's a wonderful feeling when you get to experience that. And so, just as a note before I go on to the next step, if that's something that you're really longing for, something that you're really wanting to feel a sense of support and validation and encouragement, and the space to be able to show up as more than the good girl who has to please and mold herself to be accepted, or the overachiever who has to perform just to, succeed or be accepted, then I really, really hope that you will check out Her Kind Women's Collective. It's a wonderful women's community that I'm currently building, so it depends on when you're watching this video, whether it's open, but I'm setting up a wait list, so it's going to be open soon in terms of that. But it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful women's community where it's all about that sense of validation for who you've had to be, and encouragement for who you really are, and realizing that you get to have that both. You get to have the belonging and you get to stay true to yourself. So, if you're interested in that, make sure to check out the website and check out Her Kind and see if it's something that you want to dive into as well. And then we kind of have the final step here, where this one is something that really follows up on everything that we've already talked about. And that is to actually respond to what you're feeling in terms of those emotions that we learn to label and recognize, as well as what you're sensing in terms of what your body is telling you and what your body is sensing in its nervous system and what it's telling you through its fatigue or its tensions or its pains or its needs. And it also follows up on, shifting your social environment and slowing down to actually be able to recognize what you're feeling and being able to tune back into your body, because it's one thing to know about all these things. It's one thing to know what you're feeling. And it's one thing to know that your nervous system isn't doing well, but then we need to respond. And for me, I say respond because I don't mean just take action. Sometimes it's not take action. The world out there is way too masculine and heavy and built on this, like, just take action for the sake of action, and then, everything will turn out all right because you were taking action, so it's all good. Not always about taking action, but it is about responding. You need to actually respond to what you're feeling. If you keep feeling depleted when you hang out with that friend, then you need to respond to that. Otherwise, it's not going to change. If you keep having pains in your body and aches and tensions, but you're not responding to that, nothing's going to change. And again, this is where I feel like this toxic masculinity hustle culture push to take action all the time tends to kind of jump us to, and we tend to try to jump to the response stage, and we try to just take action and kind of fix things and make things better, even though we haven't actually taken the time to shift our social environment, to slow down and have the space and capacity to make changes, to actually be able to notice and label what we're feeling and move through our feelings. And actually connect back to our body, our nervous system, our intuition, our feminine energy. So this is why I feel like it's a step that kind of comes after the other ones, but really is just tied into everything where, you label and you recognize the feeling and then you respond to it, but it's something that can't really come before you label and recognize the feelings or connect back to your feminine energy and let your body tell you what it needs. And this kind of goes back to that story that I mentioned that I dive deeper into in a different video where I just had this epiphany moment of realizing that I needed to heal from burnout. And that was me having already shifted a lot in my social environment. And I had more spaciousness. I was, embracing more of a slow living lifestyle. And I was actually then being able to recognize what I was feeling and what I was experiencing, what my body was telling me was needing. And then it was about me responding to it. And I didn't know how I was going to deal with that yet. I just knew that I needed to respond to it. And so these are kind of the overall steps that I feel like are essential to be able to reclaim your true self and step back into your power. And yet, I can tell you all these steps. In this video, I feel like I can kind of give you the plan. But the truth is that nothing will ever actually change unless you stop thinking about the plan, unless you stop thinking about the things that you need to do, or stop thinking about the changes you want to make, and you actually just take the first step. Even if you won't be able to get like a complete slow living lifestyle just by taking one step. You can take one step and it will get you further. It will get you closer. And again, you can plan for as long as you possibly want to plan, but you need to take the first step. And you won't know how to do all these things. You won't know how to really be able to sit with your emotions if you haven't yet taken the step of creating more spaciousness in your day to be able to do that. And so that's why if you're feeling very stuck in the I'm still thinking about it and I don't know how to do this kind of fear of it all, then I really recommend checking out the video that I published before, talking about why you still don't feel ready or confident enough to begin. And so I really recommend diving into that one next if you haven't watched it already. And until next time, I really appreciate you watching these videos, and I'll see you in the next one.